Have you ever wondered whether this emptiness you feel might have nothing to do with the fact that you lack a partner, but rather with the fact that you have abandoned yourself for years? And what if what you call loneliness is actually only the echo of a woman who has stopped listening to herself in order to please others? Today, I want to tell you something that Shi Hang Yi understood better than most. Something that society doesn't want you to know because it would destroy its most profitable business, convincing you that you need someone in order to be complete. But what if it is exactly the opposite? What if the loneliness you fear so much is in fact the doorway to your own liberation? Shi Hang Yi said that most people don't love but cling to each other. They use the other as a shield against their own existence. And we women who grow up in a culture where we are taught from girlhood that our worth lies in being chosen have perfected this disappearance into the romantic ideal. We become experts at reading the feelings of others while losing contact with our own. For decades, you have been sold the story that a woman without a partner is incomplete, that something in you is broken. If you prefer being alone instead of negotiating every aspect of your life with someone else, you were told that true love means sacrifice, adaptation, that you are only half of something greater. Yet no one explained to you what this really costs, the slow disappearance of who you truly are. How often have you changed your opinion to avoid conflict? How many dreams have you put away in a drawer because they didn't fit into the shared life? How many parts of your essence have you hidden in the name of harmony? You called it maturity, you called it love. But in truth, it was the beginning of your own disappearance. Shi Hang Yi knew that some paths require silence, solitude, and sacrifice. But not the sacrifice of yourself, rather the sacrifice of fear. The fear of appearing selfish just because you choose yourself. The fear of being judged because you find your own company more intense than the lukewarmness of a comfortable relationship. The fear of discovering that maybe, just maybe, you are enough for yourself. And now, as you hear these words, something is moving inside you. Because deep down you know there is a version of you that you have been waiting for a long time. A version that does not need external validation to breathe, that does not negotiate its essence for companionship, that can be alone without falling apart. Do you dare to meet her? Because that's exactly what this is about. Bringing back the woman you were before you learned to disappear. Discovering who you are when no one is watching, when you don't have to justify yourself, when you don't have to smooth your edges. Stay with me, because what comes next will change your relationship with yourself forever. Society has a very clear plan for your life. You have been programmed from childhood with an invisible script. School, work, finding someone, marrying, having children, growing old together. Sounds nice, sounds safe, sounds like the path every woman should take. But no one asked you if that really is your path or just the only one you were allowed to imagine. Shi Hang Yi knew when you follow someone else's script, it is a silent form of self-destruction. You live someone else's life while your own soul slowly withers, waiting for its moment. And we, women raised to be pleasing, have turned this sacrifice into a virtue. We were taught that our highest purpose in life is to be there for others, to define our identity through someone else, and to call it love. But what happens when one morning you wake up and no longer know who you are? What happens when you realize that you have lived for so many years as the girlfriend of, the wife of, the mother of, that you have completely lost sight of the woman underneath? That is frightening because it means you have lived like a shadow of yourself, a tailored version meant only for outside consumption. Romantic love, as it has been sold to us, is in truth an emotional prison nicely decorated with flowers and promises. You were taught that to love means to merge, to lose yourself in the other, to build an identity based on emotional dependence. You were told that if you truly love, you must be willing to change, to adapt, to be less of yourself so the other feels comfortable. Shi Hang Yi saw in this a form of psychological violence, the violence of demanding that someone betray themselves in the name of love. The violence of creating women who cannot exist without the confirming gaze of a man. The violence of convincing you that your loneliness is a problem to be solved instead of a sacred space to inhabit. Have you noticed how everyone automatically assumes you are searching as soon as you are single, as if your natural state were a deficiency, as if your wholeness depended on being chosen by someone, as if inner peace were an anomaly that needs to be explained? But what if it were exactly the other way around? What if the women who choose solitude are not lost but finally found? The truth is, the world does not forgive women who have learned to be enough for themselves. It does not forgive when women realize they can be happy without adjusting their entire life to someone else. It does not forgive when women understand that solitude is not weakness, but strength. Because a woman who does not need to be rescued is dangerous. She is free. And freedom, especially women's freedom, has always been a threat to the established order. Let me tell you something Shi Hang Yi discovered that changed his view of love. Most people who say they love are in fact running away from themselves. They use romance like an anesthetic to avoid the raw, unfiltered encounter with their own soul. And we, women raised as emotional saviors, have perfected this escape. We were taught that our worth lies in our ability to love, to nurture, to support, to be the emotional home for someone. But no one taught us to build our own home. No one told us that the most important relationship of our life is the one with ourselves. No one explained that we can only truly love once we learn not to abandon ourselves anymore. How often have you silenced your intuition because it didn't say what your partner wanted to hear? How often have you betrayed your own truth to preserve peace? How often have you felt that stabbing in your chest telling you this is not right and ignored it out of fear of being alone? The loneliness you fear so much is not the problem. The problem is that you never learned to be with yourself. You confused loneliness with abandonment because you have abandoned yourself for years in the name of love. You stopped listening to your inner voice. You stopped honoring your needs. You stopped protecting your boundaries. You became a stranger to yourself. Shi Hang Yi understood that individuation, the process of truly becoming yourself, requires times of sacred solitude, not the bitter solitude of rejection, but the conscious solitude of choice. The solitude that allows you to hear the quiet voices of your soul without the noise of outside expectations. The solitude that brings you back to yourself. For when you are truly alone, without distractions, without needing to impress or care for anyone, something extraordinary happens. You begin to remember who you were before you learn to disappear. You begin to recognize your own voice beneath all the voices that told you how you should be. You begin to trust your own company more than outside validation. Exactly there, in this conscious solitude, true feminine strength arises. Not the strength of enduring and persevering, but the strength of self-choice and self-respect. The strength of knowing that you can be alone without falling apart. That you can make decisions without consultation. That you can exist without justification. A woman who has learned to be alone does not seek completion in others. She shares from her wholeness. She does not seek a savior, but seeks to be seen and valued as she truly is. She does not seek a better half. She seeks someone who has his own whole orange. And exactly this woman is dangerous for a system built on female dependence. That is why you were convinced that loneliness is your enemy, when in truth it is your greatest ally on the way back to yourself. Do you know what the difference is between a woman who chooses to be alone and one who stays in a relationship out of fear? The first one learned to trust herself. The second one learned to betray herself. Shi Hang Yi called that the difference between individuation and adaptation, between who you really are and who others want to make you. Constant adaptation is violent. It is a silent form of aggression against your own being. Every time you change your opinion to avoid conflict, every time you hide a need, every time you make yourself small so someone else can feel big, you commit a form of emotional suicide. And the tragic thing is you call it love, but true love never asks you to disappear. True love does not negotiate your essence. It does not ask you to dim your light so someone else does not feel blinded. It does not require you to hide your pain just to maintain peace. True love sees you. It respects you. It celebrates you as you are. And if you have never experienced that, then maybe it is time to give it to yourself first. Being alone teaches you something no relationship can ever teach you. Your own inner worth, not the worth you have for others, not your usefulness as a partner, provider, or emotional rescuer, but your worth simply by being your worth as a complete independent human being who does not need to be chosen in order to have value. Shi Hang Yi said, "Only when you stop looking outside for what you must find inside can you truly begin to live." And for us, women, that means disarming decades of conditioning that taught us our worth depends on being desired, needed, and chosen by someone else. Have you ever wondered why panic grips you when you imagine being old and alone? Not because loneliness is so terrible, but because you have been programmed to believe that a woman without a partner is a failed woman. But what if it were the opposite? What if a woman who chooses her own company over mediocre relationships is actually the most successful of all? Success is not measured by the number of people willing to stay with you. Success is measured by your ability to stay with yourself, by your ability to create a life so full, so rich, so authentic that you no longer need external validation. Success is measured by your courage to choose quality over quantity, depth over superficiality, truth over convenience. When a woman learns to be alone without breaking down, when she learns to enjoy her own company, when she builds a life that does not need outside approval, then she becomes something the world cannot categorize, a free woman. And a free woman is the most beautiful and at the same time the most threatening thing there is, because she can no longer be controlled, manipulated, or persuaded to accept less than she deserves. Misunderstood, motherhood has taught you to be a mother for everyone except for yourself. You were taught that caring is your nature, your purpose, your highest virtue. But no one explained to you that you first have to learn not to abandon yourself before you can truly be there for others. Shi Hang Yi understood that misguided maternal instinct can become a form of self-destruction disguised as love. How often have you put others' needs before your own? How often have you hidden your exhaustion because someone needed your energy? How often have you swallowed your pain because you did not want to be a burden? This form of love is toxic, not only for you but also for those you love, because you teach them that your needs do not matter, that your well-being is negotiable. Being alone forces you to face an uncomfortable truth. For years, you were a stranger to yourself. You were so busy reading others' feelings, guessing their needs, managing their moods, that you lost touch with your own inner world. You became an expert at giving what you never learned to receive, not even from yourself. Conscious solitude is different from isolation. It is not an escape from the world, but a return to your center. It is a sacred space where you can hear your own voice without interference. A space where you can feel your feelings without having to manage them so others feel comfortable. A space where you can be radically honest with yourself without fear of judgment. Shi Hang Yi knew that this process is painful. It is like waking from a dream and realizing you have lived someone else's life. It is the admission of all the times you betrayed yourself, all the times you said yes when you meant no, all the times you made yourself small so others could feel big. It is a grief, the grief for the woman you thought you had to be. But in that grief, something extraordinary is born, the woman you truly are, not the version for public consumption, not the version who learned to please and disappear, but the real, raw, authentic version, the version who has her own opinions, who knows what she wants, who is not afraid to say no, who does not sell her inner peace for external approval. This woman frightens all those who benefited from your constant emotional availability. She frightens those who were used to you being predictable, malleable, always ready to yield. Because a woman who chooses herself can no longer be taken for granted. A woman who knows her worth does not accept emotional crumbs. A woman who has learned to be alone is no longer afraid of being alone again. And that is your true strength. Not depending on someone else to be yourself. Not needing external validation to know your worth. Not fearing judgment because you have learned to trust your own standards. The world is full of women who stayed in relationships because they feared loneliness more than abandoning themselves. Women who chose toxic company over peaceful solitude. Women who preferred to be half of something dysfunctional than whole by themselves. Shi Hang Yi called that living in the shadow of others instead of shining in your own light. Do you recognize yourself in one of these women? Have you ever been that woman who smiles while something inside her slowly dies? That woman who says, "I'm fine," while breaking inside? That woman who learned to function in her dysfunction so well that she no longer even sees the price she pays? The truth is, staying in a relationship out of fear is not love. It is survival. It means choosing the familiar over the real, false emotional security over true growth. Living in the comfort zone is in fact a zone of slow dying, where each day you betray a little more the woman you could be. Shi Hang Yi understood that some transformations require a break. You cannot become the new version of yourself while keeping the old one alive. You cannot discover who you really are as long as you remain the person others need you to be. Choosing yourself sometimes means having the courage to disappoint those who expected you to keep disappearing. Being alone gives you back something you had lost unnoticed: your own authority. The authority to decide how you want to live, what you want to feel, and what you want to spend your emotional energy on. The authority to say no without explanation, to choose your own company over comfortable company, and to create a life that does not need external approval to be valid. This authority frightens those who benefited from your constant emotional availability. That is why as soon as a woman chooses herself, you often hear, "You've changed, you've become selfish, you're not the same anymore." And they are right, you are not the same anymore. You are no longer the woman who betrayed herself for love, who made herself small for peace, who silenced her truth for harmony. You have become something more dangerous, a woman who knows herself, a woman who has learned that being alone is not a punishment but a privilege, a woman who has discovered that her own company is more valuable than any relationship based on fear, comfort, or habit. And from this place of integrity, from this deep connection with yourself, everything changes. You no longer attract what fills gaps, but what resonates with your wholeness. You no longer seek someone to complete you, but someone who celebrates your completeness. You no longer fear being alone because you have learned that with yourself, you are never truly alone. Shi Hang Yi deeply understood something most people avoid. True growth is a lonely process. It cannot be delegated, not shared, not accomplished as a couple. It is an inner journey that demands silence, introspection, and brutal honesty with yourself, something few are willing to endure. Relationships, however loving they may be, create noise, emotional interference, too many opinions, too many expectations, too much need to explain every step. All this emotional density constantly invites you to moderate yourself, to smooth your edges, to censor yourself. But radical thinking, true growth, does not emerge in places where you must ask permission to exist. Have you noticed that your deepest ideas come when you are completely alone? That your most important insights appear in silence when no one is watching? When you do not have to turn down your intensity so others feel comfortable? That is no coincidence. Your mind needs space to be dangerous, to explore areas that would be censored immediately if you spoke them aloud. Einstein did not develop his theories at the family table. Virginia Woolf did not write her masterpiece while managing relationship conflicts. Frida Kahlo did not paint her deepest pain after first asking others if it was appropriate. These women and men knew something that the culture of romantic love makes us forget. Some creations need a protected psychic incubator, a place without noise, without emotional interference. True creativity crosses boundaries, is unpredictable, often inappropriate, and it rarely fits into ordinary relationships. Imagine interrupting a deep train of thought just to clear up a household misunderstanding, to soothe an insecurity, or to explain why you did not reply to a message. It seems small, but over time it is corrosive. The mind loses the thread, the thought evaporates, and the idea that was about to be born dies. Hardly anyone notices how often this cycle repeats itself in marriages, relationships, and even well-meaning partnerships. Shi Hang Yi would call it a slow poison, the constant dilution of creative will. And the tragic thing about it is it feels normal. Most accept this intellectual mediocrity as the price of love, as part of the pact. But the creator who is alone does not accept that. She chooses something else. She chooses to wake up whenever she wants, to think until her head burns, to write without a clock, to destroy what she created the day before, and to begin again, all without having to explain her process to anyone. The absence of ties in this context is fertility, space, a fire that never dies because no one demands that it be subdued. Of course, that has its price. No one waits for you in the living room. There are no romantic dinners, no Sunday plans. You are seen as strange, eccentric, cold. But in return, you gain something no one can give you. The freedom to think as far as your soul reaches. At some point, every woman faces the moment when she must decide who her life truly belongs to. Not in theory, but in practice. For most say they are free, yet live like employees of others' expectations. They claim to choose for themselves, but every step is filtered through fear of judgment, rejection, loneliness. Choosing yourself is more than an act of courage. It is an act of war. A silent declaration that you will no longer negotiate your integrity for society. Shi Hang Yi knew this choice had its price. For the moment you decide to place yourself at the center of your life, everything that has so far revolved around you out of convenience begins to break apart. People leave, plans collapse, relationships dissolve, and what remains is you naked, free, and finally whole. Most do not want this kind of freedom. They want the edited version, freedom with instructions, with guaranteed affection, with soothing music in the background. But real freedom is brutal, empty, dangerous. It does not come with applause, but with silence and with full responsibility for every one of your decisions. True sovereignty does not mean ruling others, but being ruled by no one. Neither by culture, nor by lack, nor by fear. You know you are on this path when you stop asking if others agree with. It's your decisions. When you begin to live without permission, when you say no and no longer feel guilt, when you walk alone, even though everyone says you are wrong, this choice frightens and isolates, but it liberates because you realize what no one told you. The life you really want does not fit into any template, and to live it, you must betray expectations, disappoint, and frustrate those who projected onto you a version that never existed. This is exactly where many give up. They return to lukewarm relationships, predictable jobs, plans that disturb no one. They call it peace, but deep down they know it is surrender. Shi Hang Yi would say, become who you are, but no one teaches you how. Because truly being yourself means giving up the safety of being the version others approve of. It means placing yourself at the center of your life without fear of being called selfish. Selfishness is not thinking of yourself. Selfishness is demanding others to think for you. The person who chooses herself stops delegating. She no longer blames others for her unhappiness. She does not wait for rescue. She does not need understanding to move on. She is enough for herself, and that scares people. For whoever is enough for herself cannot be bent. She does not need to please to belong. She does not need to agree to keep affection. She does not need to hide her intensity to fit in. This person is dangerous because she is free. And in a world built on emotional dependency, a free person is a threat. The fact that you have come this far means something. It means that on some level you already knew. The life sold to you with rings, promises, and emotional stability is not your life. Maybe you tried it. Maybe you are still trying. But something inside you remains restless, whispering that there is more. And this more does not lie in finding someone, but in becoming someone. Someone who does not need validation to breathe. Someone who can be alone without collapsing. Someone who builds a life not to be accepted but to be real. Shi Hang Yi said, whoever has a why can bear almost any how, but you only find this why when you silence the world around you, and that demands courage, letting go, and the loss of the comforts that lulled your soul to sleep. The world does not care about your freedom, it cares about your adaptation. But at some point, adaptation becomes synonymous with dying only in slow motion. Now you have two options: return to normality and pretend this message did not move you, or take the risk of living as if you owed nothing to anyone, The risk of carrying in your heart the only loyalty that matters. The loyalty never to betray yourself. I had to be alone for a long time to understand that. And it was not a functional single life with party nights and apps. It was not that kind of loneliness. It was the kind that makes everything around you silent. I remember one night it rained. I sat on the floor leaning against the cold wall of my room, not out of drama, but exhaustion. And for the first time, I wanted no one to talk to, no one to save me. I wanted to hear myself, to understand myself, to piece myself together anew. And there, in that almost primitive state of presence, I realized I am whole, wounded but whole, alone. Nay, but free, afraid but honest. And right there, everything began to make sense. If this message has reached you, it was no accident. Life does not send such thoughts to those who are still asleep. It whispers them to those who have already begun to awaken. And if you now feel it is time to put yourself first and begin your own journey of reconnection with yourself, then look at the material I have lovingly prepared. Tell me in the comments which part of yourself you have long wanted to get to know. I would love to read you and accompany you on this path. If this message has resonated within you, share it with a woman you know needs to hear it. And if you want more content like this, subscribe to the channel. Thank you for staying this far. Your presence means everything